Hello, my lovely library lions. Today I'm going to go over my summer TBR. As you know, I don't do monthly TBRs. I just find it too stressful to plan out my months so stringently. But I do a seasonal TBR where I pick 10 books that I need to get through each season just to make sure that the books that are sitting on my TBR cart don't stay sitting there for the rest of forever. So let's get started. I always have a lot of OwlCrate books on my TBR because I went through a phase where I was not reading any of the OwlCrate books I got and I felt like that was a waste of a subscription. So now I try to read them pretty soon after I receive them, which means that I have 3 to read each season. The first one I've selected here is Witches Steeped in Gold by Sienna Smart. So this is a story about 2 witches who are enemies. I don't know tons about it because, again, I just got it in OwlCrate. It's not a book that I selected for myself. But I have heard rumors that it is sapphic. Other people are saying that it isn't really sapphic. It's not enemies to lovers. I'm not sure what to expect from this. I hope it's enemies to lovers because that would be fantastic. It's my favorite trope. I know it's like a lot of people's favorite tropes. It's super overdone, but I would love to see some sapphic witches, enemies to lovers. And that's pretty well all I know about this book, is that it's going to be about these 2 witches on the cover here. By the way, the cover is stunning. Just look at that. It is absolutely beautiful. I love the foiling that OwlCrate had done more in gold. So I'm hoping that it's a sapphic enemies to lovers, but it might not be. But that's alright. I'm sure I'll enjoy it either way. OwlCrate's been doing really well with picking books that I enjoy recently, so I am still excited to read this regardless of what's inside. Speaking of enemies to lovers and also witches, which is strangely similar considering they both came out into OwlCrate at similar times, Sweet and Bitter Magic by Adrienne Toole is definitely enemies to lovers and sapphic, and it's about a witch who can't feel love and a witch who is a source of magic. So can't feel love, source of magic, and they make a pact to work together, and in exchange, this girl here, her name is Wren, is going to give Tamsin her ability to feel love for her father, and they're going to fall in love on the way somehow. Maybe more, not so much enemies to lovers, they don't necessarily hate each other, they just don't get along. But I'm still really excited to get into this, and I love that OwlCrate has stained the pages this pretty purple color. Really excited to read this. We need more sapphic enemies to lovers. That's what I want in the world. That's what we need in the world today. I am really bad at reading the first book of a series and then never picking up the sequel, so I've decided to make myself read some sequels this month, and the first one is Thunderhead by Neal Shusterman. So I adored Scythe when I read it. It was one of my favorite books that I read that year, and I always intended to read Thunderhead and then The Toll, and I just never got to it because, again, I just let sequels fall apart, and, I wanted to have the paperback to match my Scythe paperback, and that didn't come out for a year after it originally published, so it was a while, but I am going to make myself read it sometime this summer. I picked up both of the books, so I own Thunderhead and The Toll now. They are on my TBR cart, which makes it more likely that I'm actually going to read them sometime in the near future. I'm really excited to see how this story ends. I love the world where essentially death is no longer a thing that happens, so they have to cull the population in order to keep numbers down. I think that's a really exciting premise, and I think the job of Scythe is really neat to get a look into. I love Shusterman's speculative fiction. I think he's one of the best people writing it right now. I don't read a ton of speculative fiction, so I can't really say that for sure, but I'm really excited to read this. I'm so glad that I finally broke down and bought it so that I can complete this series. Staying on the topic of sequels, I have The Night Country by Melissa Albert. So I read The Hazelwood, it must have been in 2018, 2019, a long time ago, and I just never picked up The Night Country. The cover's pretty. I like the concept of the story where, there's fairy tales and they're sort of real, sort of not real. It's a mystery they have to go solve. I didn't so much like the characters, and I don't really remember much about the characters or the plot after they find out the fairy tales are real. I kind of sort of dozed off at that part of the book, I guess, and it made me not super excited to pick up The Night Country, but I was still interested enough in the story that I didn't want to just drop it and forget about it existing. So I picked this up when I saw it for sale on Book Outlet, and I said that I would read it, and it sat on my TBR cart for over a year now. I'm going to make myself read this, if just to get it off my TBR cart, and to see if it's worth picking up Tales of the Hinterlands, which is the fictional book of fairy tales the story is based upon, which I think I would probably actually enjoy more than the actual story, the actual book. But I do want to finish this series. I've been waiting so long to do it. It's never been my priority, so I'm going to make it my priority this summer. The last sequel on my list is a behemoth, and that's why I haven't gotten around to starting it. It is The Name of All Things by Jen Lyons. So this is the sequel to The Ruin of Kings, and it's part of the Chorus of Dragons series. There's going to be 5 books, I believe, in it. So it's quite a big series. It's already on the 4th book, and I still haven't read the 2nd book because, again, I read Ruin of Kings and I thought, that's neat. I'll pick up the sequel sometime. I did pick it up when I saw it for sale on Book Outlet, and then I left it on my TBR cart forever, and it's taking up a decent chunk of space on there with the size that it is, so I figure it's summer, I might have a little extra time to read. I'll try and get through this. The actual story, I've forgotten a lot of what has happened in here. I know the main character is named Kieran, and that the thing that drew me most to continuing the series was all these cute little footnotes. It's essentially written like a legal document and a history entwined into one. The idea is that a historian is presenting this person's life, and there is also a court sort of case going on where someone's been arrested, and this is going to be used in that case somehow. That's all I remember about it, and that there was a dragon, and that there's a lot of characters. It's a very good fantasy book from what I remember. I enjoyed it, and I didn't have trouble getting through it like I do sometimes with bigger adult fantasy, so I am excited to read the sequel. It's just very intimidating to read a book this big, knowing how long it'll take me and that it might put me behind on some goals, but I'm going to do it this summer so that I can pick up the 3rd book and let that sit on my TBR cart for a year. The next book isn't a sequel per se, it's the 1st book in the series, but I read the sequel first. It's one of those series where the books are connected by theme, but you don't have to read them in order. So it's My Lady Jane by Cynthia Hand, Brody Ashton, and Jody Meadows. This is a story about Lady Jane Grey, so the sequel was a retelling of Jane Eyre, and I believe the 3rd book in the series is about Calamity Jane, so obviously the theme is that they're just all about people named Jane, and they're doing another series that just follows different Marys through history and fiction. So I really, really liked the retelling of Jane Eyre. I don't like the original Jane Eyre, so I was very hesitant to pick up a retelling, but then it was included in my OwlCrate box, so I had to read it, and it was so funny. Maybe one of the funniest books that I ever read. I instantly knew I wanted to read the rest of this series and continue with the Mary series when it started. So I picked this up, and I never touched it again. I think about it sometimes, I'm like, oh, that would probably be like a fun read, but I just never have time, and so I thought I'd put it on my summer TBR so there's at least some responsibility there to complete it. It's really because the series is disconnected and you can read it in any order and it doesn't matter that I've not picked it up, because there's no story thread that I'm following. I'm not excited to learn what's going to happen to these characters because this is about an entirely different cast and it's an entirely different story. So in a way it's a standalone, which means there's no pressure for me to pick it up because I'm not waiting to complete a story that I've started, but I do want to finish it because I want to pick up My Calamity Jane and then move on to, I think the 1st book in the Mary series is My Contrary Mary. But I don't want to do that until I've read this one. I don't want to keep accruing these books that I'm never going to finish. So I'm going to finish this one, and then I'll let myself get My Calamity Jane and maybe look into reading that sometime. Another book that's been sitting on my TBR for just the longest time is Stranger Than Fanfiction by Chris Colfer. So this is written by one of the stars of Glee, which I was really into in high school for like a little bit, and then I just kind of forgot about it. I never finished the series or anything. It wasn't something that I was die-hard fan of, but this book is about fandom, so of course I picked it up. It's a book about a celebrity from a show that kind of seems like a cross between like Doctor Who and Supernatural, that kind of fandom-based show, and he decides to go on a road trip with some of his biggest fans, and hijinks ensue. I hate road trip books. I've never really found a road trip book that I enjoy, but because this is about fandom and I love every book I read about fandom, I thought I would give it a try. I'm always a little wary of books written by celebrities because sometimes they're ghost written, sometimes they're just poorly written, but you know what, sometimes they're hidden gems that I never would have expected the celebrity to come out with. And I know Chris Colfer has been writing a few different things, that he has a series that's doing really well, so I thought I'll give it a try. It's based about fandom. That's something that I always love in series, and maybe this will be the first road trip book that actually gets me to enjoy a road trip book. So I'm really excited to dive into that, and it's pretty short too. It's only about 300 pages, so that'll be a nice, quick, breezy read for sometime this summer. So the book that has actually been on my Goodreads TBR shelf the longest is This Is Our Story by Ashley Elston. I don't remember why I initially put this on my TBR. I don't know if it was the cover. I don't know what I thought the book was about that it got on my TBR. But this is a story about 5 friends going on a hunting trip, and 4 of them come back and the other one has been shot and killed in an accident. So there's obviously going to be a thriller mystery aspect. There's lies. We have to try and figure out what happened, what actually went on that hunting trip, because obviously the shooting accident wasn't really an accident. There wouldn't be a book if it was. So it's about that. It's not a book that I would typically read. I don't know how it got on my TBR shelf or why I put it there. It's a mystery to me, but it's been on there for years, since about 2016 or so when I started book blogging. And I thought I need to get it off my TBR shelf. I've been trying to look at the books that have been on my TBR shelf the longest and throw a few of them onto my seasonal TBRs every season. And this was the one that has been sitting at the very top, waiting to be read for years and years, and I don't even know why I want to read it. It's not going to be a super long read. It's a contemporary thriller, so it should be a fast-paced read. I should be able to get through it in a couple sittings. I'm going to get through it. I'm going to finish this book and figure out why it was there. Is it worth being on my TBR? Am I going to enjoy it? I have no idea. But I'm going to get it off there because it's been on there for an unacceptable amount of time.
Okay, so wow, I can't count and I have no object permanence. I do have 10 books that I'm going to be reading this summer, and the 10th book is my manga for the season, and obviously I read more than one manga a season, but I like to put one on my TBR list just to be safe, and it's going to be the 13th volume of Fullmetal Alchemist, Fullmetal Edition by Hiromu Arakawa. So I don't have the physical copy of this book yet. I think I'm going to get it as a gift, I'm not sure, but it has Olivier Armstrong on the cover. It's absolutely beautiful. It is still in the Briggs arc, which is kind of a slow point in the series, but I'm obviously thrilled to have it. Again, these covers are so beautiful when you put them on a shelf. I am so happy they're doing collector's editions of these books, and I'm thrilled to be able to get my hands on this manga. And yeah, it is supposed to be on my TBR, and because I didn't have the physical copy, I forgot to mention it at all. So I'm mentioning it now. I'm going to display the cover on the screen or something like that, and just wanted to add in, there are actually 10 books on my TBR. Moving on.
The last book that I have set myself out to read this summer is The Ones We're Meant to Find by Joan He. So this is a science fiction book about 2 sisters who are struggling to find each other in this new, I believe one of them is in like a utopian society and the other one is cast out, and they don't know of each other, but they have to find their ways to each other, and that's going to be the plot of the story. Honestly, I'm not super thrilled about this one. Science fiction isn't really my genre. This is my 3rd OwlCrate book, so I have to read it because I subscribe to OwlCrate. I'm going to get my money's worth. I don't know how I feel about this. OwlCrate has surprised me before with books I never would have picked up without OwlCrate encouraging me to, so there is a chance that this is going to be another surprise and a book that I fall in love with, that I'm going to be so grateful that OwlCrate introduced me to, just like with Legendborn. But science fiction is harder for me to find any pleasure reading. I'm worried this is going to be another Heart of Iron, which is one of my least favorite OwlCrate books I've ever received. I'm going to give it a chance. I think it deserves a chance. And the cover is also just really pretty. I love painting style covers. I know that's super basic, but look at how nice that is. It's very abstract. But I do like it, and if it's a good story, it'll look really pretty in my shelf, and if it's not, I'll probably still keep it on my shelf because it's a signed OwlCrate book and I don't really want to let those go. But maybe I'll be surprised. I'm hoping I'll be surprised and actually enjoy it. Those are all 10 of the books that I plan to read over the course of the summer. Obviously, I'll throw in some books that I'm just in the mood for, or books that I'm super excited for that release, maybe a book that I get as a gift. That's why I like to do seasonal TBRs. It gives me a little bit of flexibility as far as what I want to read and when I want to read it. I did do really well in my spring TBR. I finished all 10 of those books, plus some other books that I wanted to read, so I'm really proud of myself for that. And I'm hoping summer will be just as easy. I'm going to read these 10 books, and then I should have time to read some other books that I want to read. I hope that you enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you did, and have a lovely weekend. I hope to see you again next week.